Do we have any runners in the crowd? People would say they actually enjoy running. There's just a couple people, which I think is about the right number. Because here's what I would say, is I'm someone who runs. I run about 4 to 5 times a week, but I would not say I like it. I run because at a certain point in my life, my metabolism changed. And to be able to eat what I wanted to eat, I needed to start exercising more. My parents took us on a cruise back, and on the bottom of the cruise ship, there's actually a track that you can run on right by the water. And one of the signs on that track says, 3 more laps, dessert is worth it. And I resonated so deeply with that, and every time I ran 3 more laps because my running is for that reason. So most of the time, I don't really enjoy it. It's getting better, though. I'm actually starting to like it a little more. I'm finding it a little more peaceful. But there are days where your run is just a slog. Your legs feel tired, and you just don't want to go and do it. And I've been having some days like that. But I woke up about a month ago feeling like today's going to be a good day. My body feels refreshed. My legs feel good. This is going to be one of those runs that I really enjoy. And I like running in the morning. And so it's like 5:45 in the morning. I get up. I start my run. I'm about a mile into it, and honestly, I feel like I'm crushing it. Everything's going well. I'm listening to a sermon. The sun is rising. It's gorgeous. And as I run, my right foot kind of slides over a little bit, and so there's grass here, or sidewalk here, grass here. My foot hits between both of them. The problem is that where there was supposed to be grass, there was nothing. And so my foot hits here, turns over, I hear a pop, and I just go down. And I am laying on the ground because I know it's not good. You can see a picture of me. See, isn't that a beautiful sunset behind me? It was supposed to be a gorgeous day. But that's my ankle. It looks like someone stuffed a softball into it and then, for good measure, put a golf ball on the side just because why not? And I'm laying there on the side of the road, a mile from my house, knowing that is not an ankle you walk on. Thinking, what do I do? And it's before 6, so I know it's fruitless, but I still call my wife, knowing that she's not going to pick up. She is not up before 6 a.m., and we don't even sleep with our phones in the room, so it's not even like, ooh, maybe I'll wake her up. So I make the required 2 phone calls to my wife. That doesn't help. And I think, who am I going to call next? And actually, it was pretty easy. We're in a great neighborhood community here at Meadowbrook, and so we live over in West Allis. We have a group there, and there was a couple people, Phil and Pete, who both live in West Allis. So I send them both this text of me looking and sounding very pathetic and in need of their help. And a little while later, Phil responds to my text, say, hey man, I'll come get you right away. So he comes over. Not only does he pick me up, he walks me into my house as I'm hobbling on my left leg, trying to bounce upstairs. And then he comes back to my house later and brings crutches to me. And I thought, this is such a beautiful picture of community. But it also made me wonder, what would have I done 5 years ago when our community wasn't that good? When we didn't have people right around us to help us? I couldn't think of anyone I would have called who lived nearby. I was like, I probably would have had to call an Uber. And that would have been a weird ride. Or what about when my wife and I lived in Iowa? And for a year and a half, we got to the end of the year and a half, and we said there is one couple that we're friends with that we don't work with. That was it over the course of a year. I imagine in this room, there's certain people whose community is thriving. You feel like things are great. You feel known, valued. You have people who could help you. And there's some of you who I got 1 or 2 people who are getting me through. And then there's some of you who I don't really have anybody that knows me, that knows what's going on in my life, that could be there in a moment to help. The Surgeon General recently, one of the recent Surgeon Generals said, we have a loneliness epidemic on our hand. When we talk about epidemics, we usually think of diseases and other things, but what he said is we have an epidemic of loneliness. People don't feel known. Even in spaces where they're constantly around people, or when they're constantly on social media platforms where there's people who know them, they don't really feel known and cared for. And I think this is a beautiful opportunity for the church to speak into and live into one of the greatest needs in our culture today. And this morning, we're going to look at the community in the book of Acts and the principles that it gives us. So just quick big picture of where we are right now in the book of Acts. Last week, we talked about Pentecost. This is a pilgrimage holiday where people from all over came to Jerusalem. The Holy Spirit falls on the believers. They start talking in different languages. Peter goes and gives one of the most successful sermons of all time because 3,000 people came to know Jesus in one day. And now we pick up where that story left off. Some of those people went back home because it was a pilgrimage holiday, but most people think at least 1,000 of those people stayed. And so we have a church that went from 100 to over 1,000 in one day. And how do they live out community in that reality? So we're going to pick up in Acts chapter 2, starting in verse 42. It says this: "They devoted themselves to the apostles' teaching and to fellowship and to the breaking of bread and to prayer. Everyone was filled with awe at the many wonders and signs performed by the apostles. All the believers were together and had everything in common. They sold property and possessions to give to anyone who had need. Every day they continued to meet together in the temple courts. They broke bread in their homes and ate together with glad and sincere hearts, praising God and enjoying favor of all the people. And the Lord added to their number daily those who were being saved." Now, that is a pretty impressive view of the church. That is like the highlight reel. I'm a big Brewers fan, and a lot of times when they're playing, I just can't stay up late enough to watch the end of the game. But the morning comes, I will watch the highlights. I don't need to see all the kind of mundane plays or the plays that weren't very good. I see the highlights. What you're getting right here is a summary of what the early church looked like with its highlights. And it's beautiful. But let's talk about reality. The early church didn't always look like that. Flash forward a couple chapters. In this text, it said everyone was sharing all that they had, and a couple chapters later, you're going to get Ananias and Sapphira. Wait for that one if you don't know that story. Let's just say they don't give what they say they're going to. The next chapter, you have the giving of food to the widows, and the Hellenistic Jews are actually not being given food. So it's not this beautiful utopian world. You have Paul and Barnabas arguing about should John Mark come along with us because he left us a little while back. And that doesn't even get into Paul's letters where he talks about the disunity and disharmony in the multiple churches. He talks about places where people aren't even talking to each other anymore. And he says this should not be. So it's important to note that when we look at this section of Acts. This is a beautiful picture of what Christianity can look like, of what community can look like, but we know it's not always there. And I've seen people take this passage, assume every church has to look exactly like this, and never be content, and just jump from place to place. And it reminds me of this quote from Dietrich Bonhoeffer. He said this: "Those who love their dream of a Christian community more than they love the Christian community itself become destroyers of that Christian community, even though their personal intentions may be ever so honest, earnest, and sacrificial." Bonhoeffer knew that if you had this ideal community and you expected every community to always look like that, you would never be content. And you would always leave. And you'd actually do more destruction than good to the community that you're in. So as we look at Acts 2:42 through 47, I urge you to look at the principles and be motivated for what we're going to see, but not believe every community you're in is going to perfectly live this out all the time. So what are the principles, though? Those things that we can latch on to, those things that can be guiding posts to us for what community can look like. I think the first is that biblical community is intentional. If you notice, they meet together. They're constantly around one another. It says they're devoted to the fellowship. The Greek word koinonia, which means the gathering of believers in encouragement, faith, and love. They were devoted to that. They were devoted to one another. Every day they continued to meet together. Every day. It can be hard to get here on a Sunday morning. And I acknowledge that. I work here, and it can feel hard sometimes. Because there's just so many things going on. I can think of seasons of my life where I'm not motivated to go to my small group that week. Like, tonight, I just want to be by myself. It talks about how they were devoted to that. They met together. It says they broke bread in their homes, which was one of the most significant signs of intimacy and value of one another, to invite people over into your home and eat a meal together. There is something beautiful that happens over a meal together. When your phones are put away, when everything else is kind of blocked out and you just get to know one another. You hear stories of what God is doing in their lives. And so there's something super important about just meeting each other, just being present with each other. I think this is one of the reasons why things like CrossFit, workout classes, even book clubs are so popular. There are things people might not do on their own, but they love being in a space where people know them. Where when they miss a week, people are like, hey, where were you last week? We missed you. In my previous job, we worked out of coffee shops quite a bit. And there was a coffee shop we'd go to every week. And there were like 6 of us, so we'd always need like 2 tables. And unfortunately, this coffee shop started getting too popular. So we couldn't always get 2 tables. And so we had to start going to a different one. But one day I was working by myself, and I'm like, oh, I want to go back. And so I went back, and the barista, when he sees me, he's like, oh, it's been a while. I haven't seen you. I'm so glad you're back. And I felt so known and valued. I'm like, I want to come back here again. This guy knows me. And we had good conversations, and I sat and talked with him more. But it's kind of similar to that line in the old sitcom Cheers. You want to go where everybody knows your name. We love that feeling of being known. It can be scary, but it makes us feel welcome. And so the early church was intentional. It met together, but it didn't just meet together. It engaged in spiritual practices together. It says they devoted themselves to the apostles' teaching and also to prayer. Now, they probably did this on their own, but throughout the book of Acts, we see corporate prayer happening all the time. Their prayer life was not just private. It was corporate. They met together. They did prayers together. It said they even kept some of the old Jewish prayers at different times of the day. They would meet together and pray. And we know that they probably were together for a lot of the times we're talking about the apostles' teaching or the other parts of the Bible, because many people couldn't read. So they had to do public reading of Scripture and talk about it together. And so they came together not just to be around one another, but to also engage in the spiritual practices together, to have their eyes lifted to Jesus. My son is not playing a fall sport this year. He decided not to play football after he saw 3 quarterbacks in the grade above him get concussions last year. But he decided this year, I still want to work out. I want to try to do something. And so we looked around, and we found this place where he could go train once a week. And so he does that, and then they give him like workouts 2 other days during the work week to do at home. Now here's the thing. My son would go downstairs, he'd hit baseballs before, but he did not like lifting a weight to save his life. But now he goes to this place where it's beautiful. They have 7th graders up to 12th graders together. And I've seen them all, like when they're trying to get like PRs in their vertical jump, cheering one another on. And now he's excited to go every Monday. But also, his workouts at home on Wednesday and Friday are way better. Because that time on Monday, that one time even being together, is transforming him. It's giving him a new vision for what he could do. And that's just with working out. I think that's the picture of what happens when we engage in spiritual practices together, when we devote ourselves to the apostles' teaching, to the Bible together. It makes us want to read it more. I've never been in Christian community and thought, I want to read the Bible less on my own. No, it challenges me. It encourages me. It gives me people to pray for and people to ask for prayer from. There's an intentionality in biblical community, not just to be together, but to be engaging in the things of God together. So we see that. Biblical community is intentional. But biblical community is also interdependent. Listen to some of the language they use here. They say they had everything in common. They sold their property and possessions and gave to everyone who had need. Acts chapter 4 has a similar summary section. And it says, starting in verse 32, all the believers were one in heart and mind. No one claimed that any of their possessions was their own, but they shared everything. They shared good. It almost sounds like they shared a mind together. They were of one heart and one mind. There was a unity in this church. There was a giving nature in this church. The way they talk about sharing, that nothing was their own, is foreign to so many of us. It's foreign to me. I don't even like when my kids wear my socks because they end up getting holes in them. I end up losing them. I hate it. I have gotten way overly angry about seeing my kids wear my socks. But that shows a little bit about my heart, that I'm just not willing to share. But the early church, they shared everything. They had all things in common. And I think we can think of this in like material goods only. And so then it does seem like, well, the people who have money give to those who don't have money and all is good. But when Paul talks about the church, he talks about it like a body in every way. That there are people who are the feet, people who are the hands, people who are the eyes, people who are the ears, and we all have a part to play. We all work together. We're all dependent on one another. And one of the greatest examples of this, I think, is prayer. Inviting people into your life to pray for you is a humbling thing to do, especially if you're specific in your prayer requests. It's one thing for me to say, would you pray for my marriage? That's good. That's a good prayer request. But it's another thing for me to say, would you pray for my marriage? We have not been connecting well lately. We're fighting more than we have. It feels distant. Would you pray? There is an interdependence there on other people to speak into and pray into my life and asking God to move and work. And that's the type of community that the Bible is pointing us to. This community where we need one another. I've asked people before, is it easier to give help or ask for help? And almost every person says it's easier to give help. I could start a meal train right now to help someone and we could fill all those spots. But rarely does anyone ever come to me and say, hey, could you make a meal train for me? Because we don't feel like we can do that. But it doesn't seem like in the early church they had that problem. They recognized that this was just part of what the body was supposed to do for each other. That is why at Meadowbrook we talk a lot about our neighborhood communities. We find this to be one of the best places for these realities to be lived out. For there to be intentional community where you meet together regularly, where you engage God's word together, where you pray for one another, but also where you're just there for each other, helping each other. I think of the example I shared. Phil and Pete are the two guys who I called to come and help me. They're both in my neighborhood communities, and we talked about a lot of different things. It wasn't just like one day out of the blue, I was like, hey, can you guys come help me? They're the people who process with me for a year about what the next step in my occupational life would be, where I would go next. I let them in and asked them, am I being crazy to think about this? And we've had similar conversations with each other about parenting or jobs or other things. Because I have people who know that about my life. And I could share multiple different stories of neighborhood communities and how we've seen those live out these first two principles. But I'm going to invite up Emily to share just from her experience. I got to hear her story actually at a members meeting under a year ago and was just encouraged by just the simplicity of how God works through neighborhood communities and through a gathering of people.
Good morning. I'm Emily. My family has gone here, which I thought was 6 or 7 years, but my husband informed me closer to 10. So time has just stood still for me, apparently. But during that beginning time, it was before my husband and I were married, and we had been coming for about a year. I would say we were coming in, and we were leaving. We'd say hi to the greeters, but no one else really. And there was a moment where we decided, we're like, okay, let's go one more time and then reevaluate and see if there's a better fit somewhere for us. And that last time, we sat next to Heather Freeborn. And if you've ever sat next to Heather Freeborn during worship, it is like this energizing experience. It is incredible. And at the end, she turned to us and introduced herself and asked if we were in a neighborhood community. And we were not. She gave us the card. And so we signed up and we're like, maybe we'll go, we'll see. And we ended up going to our first one. And Heather was there, which was just, it felt like God put us in that spot right at that time. But it was also a Seder meal. So it was, my husband didn't grow up his family going to these community groups or church. And so it was a very formal first neighborhood community. But I convinced him to keep going, so we kept going. And, fast forward to today, and these are the people that we have this deep relationship with that when we were first coming here, you walk in the lobby and you can see people just know each other so deeply, and we wanted that so bad for ourselves, and it's really scary to dive into something like that too, and vulnerable. But now we are there with our group, and now they hold us accountable. They are people we go to to celebrate the hard times also. And even last week, our car died after service. And we have a 1-year-old and a 4-year-old in the back ready to go. They want to go to the park. And, we hear the click, click, click of our car. We both look, we're like, we better go check with Ryan. And Ryan helped us find someone to jump our car. And then it's even the celebration points in our life of our children. And I remember our first child, Reagan, when she was born, we let our family know first, and then we let our neighborhood community group know. And that was a really overwhelming time, and they came and just, they were there. Our families live an hour, 2 hours away, but it was our neighborhood community that was there, bringing us meals, holding the baby when we were overwhelmed, and they've just become so important in our life. And, now we come to church, and sometimes we want that in and out when we've had, it seems like we've lived 3 days sometimes before we come here with 2 littles. Sometimes it seems like that would be nice again. But just to go. Yeah, just to go. But we don't have that anymore. It wouldn't change anything. You come and you see all these familiar faces, and we have that relationship we were looking for. So it's really changed our lives.
It's great. Yeah. I just love that story. There's nothing crazy magical that happened in there. It was just people who met together, were intentional. They took the step, say, yes, I'll go. And then years later, after meeting together, after engaging in Scripture together, after praying for one another, after serving one another and being there for each other, this has become the people who I'm going to share the biggest life news with second after my family. And that's what the church is supposed to be. Now, is every Bible study or neighborhood community like that right away? No. That would be a lie for me to say. You go to next week and you're going to have your best friends 2 weeks later. Because there's the intentionality of continuing to meet, to put yourself out there, to grow into that type of community. But we do think it's such a powerful thing. That's why if you saw in the announcements next week between services, our neighborhood communities that are open will be there, sharing about ways you can get involved if you're not in one yet. So, neighborhood communities are intentional. They're interdependent, but they are also influential. Biblical community, I think I said neighborhood community, that's on my head. Biblical community is influential. Listen to how it talks about biblical community here. It says, everyone was filled with awe at the signs and wonders of the apostles. So they enjoyed favor with all the people. Think about that. People were seeing what God was doing, and there was awe. They were intrigued. When biblical community is not just lived sequestered over here, but out in public, people are intrigued by what God is doing. They're intrigued by the works of God. They're intrigued by the community that you're having as you see people together, and you're like, wow, those people really care about each other. People are intrigued by what God is doing. I've been blessed to be in ministry pretty much all of my adult life. I had a 6-month break where I worked maintenance at a university, putting in light bulbs and fixing vacuum cleaners. Realized that wasn't for me, and have loved the call into ministry since then. And one of the things that I love to ask people about their ministry or their church is, would people know if you left? Like, if your community, if your church left, would people notice? That's a question that we as Meadowbrook Church have to ask. If we moved from here and went somewhere else, would this neighborhood notice we were gone? With the exception on Sunday morning that it's a lot easier for them to park. Would they notice we're not here anymore? Would they notice that a light is missing, a light of the gospel, of God's kingdom going forth? Would they wonder, what is different now? That's why our church does things like collecting food for the food bank and also for Jefferson School. A little over a week ago, I got to walk a shopping cart of food over to Jefferson, these snacks. And I think they were fairly shocked. I think they thought I was going to come in with like 2 little Target bags, and I came in with a shopping cart overflowing. Lindsay Martinez on our staff had to walk with me so stuff didn't fall over. And it was such an encouragement to them. And then I got to tell them, we're actually not done yet. We're going to keep doing this through the end of the month. It's such a small, tangible way to show appreciation to them. It's why we do Harvest Fest. You see these slides that we have that we're doing it, or you hear the announcements, you're like, why do we do that? Why do we put effort into turning our parking lot into an inflatable, bouncy house amusement park, really? Because we know hundreds of kids and families are going to come through that night. And they're going to come through our parking lot, and we just get to love them, we get to care for them, we get to serve them, hopefully have conversations with them. It's why this year, for the first time, we're doing a trunk or treat. October 31st is when Jacobus Park does its neighborhood trick-or-treating. And we thought, what if we're just in the neighborhood that day as well, when people are out? And so we're inviting people to in the back, the trunk of their car, into different games or other things, so that we have 25 or so cars in that parking lot, so when kids come through that night, families are just able to hang out here for a little while. And just think of the relationships that we can build as we're more present over time in this community. Because I believe people are intrigued by how God is at work. And we need to be present in what's going on around them. So it's influential in seeing people intrigued for the gospel, but it's also influential because people's lives are transformed. Did you catch that last part of it, where it says, the Lord added to their number daily those who were being saved? Could you imagine being in a community where every day somebody new is coming to Jesus? In the early church, as they lived out their life, as they went out into their jobs, into the marketplace, and took Jesus with them, took their story of how Jesus was at work in their life with them, lives were transformed. People were coming to know Jesus. People who probably would have never thought he was the Messiah, never thought he was the King. They are moving towards faith in him. And it's just a beautiful thing that happens as the church community moves out and shares with people around them. Because people are ready. God's Spirit is at work in our lives, but in the lives of the people we go out and talk to as well. The people that we engage with. That same question, what would happen if I left, this church moved, it should be the same one you're asking in your neighborhood. Would people notice if you left? If you moved houses and went to another place? Have you gotten to know your neighbors? Have you invested into them? Every year, our neighborhood has a block party, and for like 3 years, our family ran it. I never wanted to. I'm an introvert. The thing I don't like is small talk, and that is a lot of small talk. But my wife is just wiser than me, and we've done it. And honestly, it has changed the relationships that we have with people in our neighborhood. As they're walking their dogs, they talk to us about stuff. As we're out in our backyard, they talk to us. Because you just are present. The same thing with your workplace, with where your kids are involved in school or sports or drama or whatever. Would people notice if you're gone? Because we want to be a part of seeing lives transform. You see, the beautiful picture here is that biblical community transforms people's reality. It transforms our community and how we experience the body. It transforms reality of other people as they are exposed to Jesus. The number one thing I would hear when I would talk to people about how did you come to know Jesus, they would always say, I started hanging out with a group of Christians. Or I had a Christian friend who invited me in. They thought it was weird at first, but they just kept coming back. And statistics back that up. Over 40% of people who've come to know Jesus say one of the main driving factors was a Christian community or a church that they got involved in, that they started showing up to. And over 30% say says it's a friend or a significant other. See, it's relationships, it's community. That is what God often uses to transform people's lives for the gospel. And so we've been in this Storytellers Initiative really since January, and one of the anchor texts is Psalm 107, which says, "Let the redeemed of the Lord tell their story." And we want to be a storytelling people who tell the story of how God is at work, who tell the story of what he has done in our life in the past and what he's currently doing now. And kind of the next step in our Storytellers Initiative are these cards that you saw on your chairs around you. So there should have been one of these on every chair or every other. And on one side is just the verse Colossians 4:2-6, which talks about Paul's prayer for us to be wise and make the most of every opportunity. And then on the other side, it says our prayer. It says, "Heavenly Father, I'm praying for the opportunity to engage these people with your story." And we fully believe that the first step is really praying for the people around us, praying for how God is at work, and then praying for our eyes to see and the boldness to actually step in to that story, to take the step to engage people with who God is. Biblical community is a great place to do that. You can invite people into the community you have. You can go out as a community together. But we want to challenge you and us as a church to think through who are 3 people you could be praying for. Praying for opportunities to enter their lives with God's story. And so we're actually going to do something a little different. You're going to have a minute or two just to sit with the Lord and see who he brings to mind. And you can write that on this card where those 3 slots are, the names of 3 people. If you have a storyteller's journal, you can put this in that journal. If you don't have one, never got one, we actually have ones in the back that you can pick up at the Connection Center. Because this peels into a sticker, you can put it anywhere that you're going to see it. But we just think there'd be something powerful if we as a church were spending time daily praying for people, praying for opportunities to enter into their lives. And so we're going to give you a minute or two to think through those names.